Call the meeting to order. Can everybody hear me? We're in a new venue. Just want to make sure the mic's working okay. Yeah? Good. Call the meeting to order. This is the May 20, 2014 meeting of the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. The first item on our agenda are the meeting minutes from April 22nd, which was a regular meeting, and April 29th, which was the joint meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission and the Affordable Housing Committee. April 22 and April 29. Does everybody have a copy of those? Any discussion, corrections? Can I have a motion? Motion approved by Commissioner Alessi. Second by Commissioner Jacobson. We ready to vote? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Both minutes are adopted unanimously. Next item on our agenda is 600 Hoydens Lane, request of Attorney William Fitzpatrick for a 90-day extension for filing a final subdivision map. This is a final extension.
It is. Mr. Chairman, this was a two-lot subdivision that was approved by this commission on November 12th of last year. This is the second final 90-day extension available to this, and I would expect that within that time frame they will get their bond in place and get their map recorded.
Okay. Can I have a motion? Motion to approve by Commissioner Coleman.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Alessi. Any discussion? Are we ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item is 2500 Hillside Road. Another request of Attorney William Fitzpatrick for a 90-day extension for filing a final subdivision map. This is also a final extension.
It is indeed. Similar to the previous application, this is also a two-lot subdivision that was approved on November 12th of 2013, and also the second and last extension available for filing the map for this particular application.
Very good.
Motion approved.
Motion approved by Commissioner Alessi.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Barretts. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item is 2226 Blackrock Turnpike, request of Clearview Holding LLC for a 50% release of a $22,500 bond pertaining to special permit improvements in a design commercial district.
Okay, this is the redevelopment of what was known as the Fairfield Pool Building. It's currently up and running, has Qdoba Restaurant and Bankwell, among other tenants. We do have a report in the file from engineering. The work is done except for some curbing work still to be done and cleaning of the catch basins and the hydrodynamic separator. So we are recommending a 50% release at this point of this particular bond.
Do you know if that's more than $45,000 worth of work?
No, it's not. It's 22. We'd still have 11,000 and change. The total bond is only 22.5 on this. So.
22.5.
Yeah.
For the bond. Okay, so we can still keep it 11. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I read it frankly the same way.
Yeah.
I read that the 50% is 22.5.
Okay. No, this is the total bond is 22.5. We're releasing half of it.
11,250.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, I have some other discussion, but do we have a motion for discussion purposes?
I'll move to approve the bond release.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi, second by Commissioner Barretts.
I'll second.
We had a first and a second.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve and a second on the table. So my question has to do with the railing on the top.
Yep.
There was a condition of approval of this project that the units on the roof be outside of view, and I think that upon construction there was some alteration of that. There's some siding, not siding, but panels that are put up on the roof, but it's not exactly complete.
Right. What happened was, when the restaurant fit-out occurred, some of the mechanical equipment was placed in a location that was different than what was originally proposed, so it was visible. The owners have subsequently put some solid panels up where it was kind of a picket railing along the parapet there that helped shield that. In some discussions as late as today, they have agreed to extend that those panels the length of the northerly side of the building, which is the side of the building that faces out towards the parking lot in Panera.
Yeah.
So right now it kind of goes about a third of the way down, so it's screened from Blackrock Turnpike from the front and for about a third of the run. And after further review and discussion today with their architect, they've agreed to extend that down the length of that center.
So, what about a condition of approval for this first release of the bond, that they complete that work?
First.
And then we have the balance of the bond pending this other work that you described in your notes. Would that...
I'm not, are you suggesting
What
that
you're
as a
saying
condition
is-
of the first 50% that's done, or that they make sure that that's done prior to seeking the final 50%?
Right. I would say it's a condition of approval of the release of the first 50%.
Okay, so you're inclined to approve the 50% release subject to them completing that work before we release that money?
Right.
Okay.
So I put that out there for discussion. There does seem to be, a fairly substantial amount of work that remains, just in terms of cleanup. It's more than a few items. Commissioner Barretts?
Yeah, I mean, it may be semantics, Mr. Chairman, but I tend to agree with you in your approach to this, but, saying if you have a condition pending them doing something, to me seems like we're not approving the bond release, and we'll have to come back and have some evidence that they have completed this work, right?
Well, the other option is there's no time limit on your part to take action here. You could also decide to table the matter until such time as they actually do that additional screening, if that's your concern. But they've been fairly responsive to our initial, when we raised the issue initially, they were responsive to it. I would expect that they're going to be responsive again, but if you wish to just simply table it and not take action, that's another option available to you.
And then when it comes up on our next agenda, you can report that whether that has in fact occurred, and we could take the item up at that point.
When would you expect it to come back up again?
Well, we meet next week. I don't know if they're going to have an opportunity between now and then to do that. Other than that, it would be the June the 8th, I believe, is our meeting following that. So, I mean, again, there's no time limit on your end, so we can just leave it, until it's actually done, and then we can report back.
Because, you raise a good point. The whole purpose of the bond is pending, completion of certain work,
Now,
right?
another question, do we want those panels on both sides, or just on the one side?
Well, Commissioner Francis is waiting.
What are these units that weren't put in the right place? Compressors, condensers?
They're air handlers for the restaurant.
And
I don't know if they're
Well-
they're part of the exhaust for the
Oh.
cooking system, or whether they're HVAC units. I don't know if it's a combination thereof.
Where were they supposed to go?
Well, they were originally more centered in the roof, so the front parapet would screen it, but
Okay.
After
But they
it
were
was in-
supposed to go on the roof.
oh yeah, they were planned to be on the roof. They would just were more visible than they originally anticipated, and so rather than they had a railing system on the
Right.
roof, so they've
Okay.
just put solid panels on it, and they're attractive panels to screen the view. We're just suggesting they extend that further down the side of the building.
All right, thank you. I wasn't on the commission when you looked at it, so...
No problem. No problem
Thanks.
at all. Commissioner Alessi?
No, I was just going to explain what happened originally with the condition of the approval of the building, but fine.
So, I would propose that we table the matter, and then we can have it on our next agenda. Commissioner Corcoran,
As, she was just
use the
saying,
microphone. You need a microphone.
Do we need to put panels on the other side of the building too? Or they're not visible from there?
They have panels that run down about a third of the length on that side, but beyond that, it's kind of screened from view from the diner property, which is adjacent to it. You'd only see it from internally from their site. You don't see it from the street.
On the south side.
Right.
So if you were driving into Trader Joe's along that parking lot and looking at that side of the building, would you see it?
From the back of the building, you'll see it. If you're looking, heading north on Blackrock Turnpike, and you see Penny's Diner, you see a couple, and then you'll see the railing. But it kind of dies down behind Penny's Diner when you get to that point.
Right, but if you were coming in to that parking lot where Trader Joe's and everything else is, would you see it there?
Well, you see it from the Panera side, and what we're suggesting is extending it down that side. But if you enter in from Stilson, I'm not sure how visible it is from that perspective.
So, I mean, I would tend to agree. I mean, I don't know exactly how it came about that they moved to these units, whether they consulted with staff beforehand or not.
No, I think, my opinion is even if they were placed exactly where they showed, I think they would have been a little bit more visible than they originally anticipated. And they themselves were sensitive to it and didn't, and agreed with you that it warranted some further action to screen it. So I don't think there's any objection on their part to doing it.
No, we're just trying to understand whether it's got to be both sides. I mean, I believe that the regulations require that they be that they be screened, that they be not in public view. Commissioner Alessi.
While we're on this topic, no matter if you come from the back, you come from Stilson, you're going to see a difference, and you're going to see the mechanical. So my suggestion would be is to just put those panels for the sake of uniformity. It's a brand new building. They did a nice job on the building, they did a nice job on the parking lot. And my suggestion would be to put that all the way around the whole building and just hide the mechanicals all the way around that building. And the
It would be
mechanicals, when this came before this commission, was a big to-do at the time, if you remember that.
I do.
And we were pretty adamant about those mechanicals being showed on that roof of that building. So my suggestion would be to put the panels around the whole building, not just the north side, not just half of the south side, but around the whole building itself.
Okay. All right.
But one thing, it's hard to think about this because we don't have a drawing. So we don't know what it looks like.
Well,
I've got some pictures.
he's
I
got
can forward
pictures,
you
I
tomorrow.
emailed them, and
Okay.
it does look nice, and it does look an improvement with the new panels.
So, I mean, I think that all of this is good. These are our comments, and staff can communicate with the owners. But for our purposes, I think that I would suggest that the movement here, Commissioner Jacobson, withdraw our motion. Commissioner Barrett.
I would withdraw it and
Withdraw it.
motion to table it.
Motion to
I'll
table.
second that.
And second by Commissioner Alessi. Any further discussion? No. All in favor of tabling the item signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The item is tabled unanimously. Next item on our agenda is new applications to recommend a public hearing. First is 5151 Park Avenue, special exception application of Sacred Heart University pertaining to a new residence hall in an R3 zone.
I don't have much other than what this has already been described. Sacred Heart is looking to build a new residential hall. It is a special exception, and it does require a public hearing. So that's what we're proposing to schedule.
Okay. I have a motion. Motion
I move that we
approved by
have a public hearing.
Commissioner Corcoran, second. Second by Commissioner Jacobson. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously. Next item is 92-140 Bronson Road. Zoning compliance and coastal site plan application of Garden Homes Management pursuant to 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes, proposing a 95-unit residential development in an A zone.
As the item mentions, this is an 8-30G affordable housing application. This one's a little bit different than the one that we've been currently hearing, in that there is no proposal for a zone change or regulation amendment here. It's a site plan, so our time frame is a little bit more compressed. And we did send out, so it does it's your discretion to have the hearing. We did send out an email earlier this week, or late last week, I think it was Monday, or yesterday, to kind of test, see what your availability, because of the time frame, to see who might be available to do it on a back-to-back evening. We have a regular meeting scheduled for the 8th of July in the event that we do not complete it on the hearing, to see if any of you are available on the 9th. I did get some feedback from that, but I don't, we can discuss that. We don't have to decide that at this moment, but just let me know if you haven't already, whether that might be a viable schedule for you. But other than that, this is a 95-unit residential development pursuant to 8-30G. It's for your consideration of a hearing.
Motion? Motion to,
I move that we have a hearing.
motion to move the item to a public hearing by Commissioner Corcoran. Second by Commissioner Jacobs. Any discussion? Commissioner Corcoran?
So this is just a site plan application.
Correct.
Why is this different than the other 830Gs we've had that included zone changes?
Well, the other applicants have requested zone changes and regulation amendments so that they're to match to introduce design requirements into the regulations that match their proposal. But the statute doesn't require them to do that. The statute allows the commission to act on a site plan only. If it qualifies at 8-30G, it doesn't have to meet the current standards of the regulations. It's your discretion. The Fairchild Avenue application that's under construction was ultimately the settlement of that particular matter involved the applicant withdrawing the zone change and the regulation amendment portion of that application, and the commission approving the site plan. So it's not a requirement that a reg amendment come with the application.
And the difference is that with a regulation amendment, a public hearing is required, whereas the consideration of the site plan, it is within our discretion as to whether to have a public hearing. That's first. Second, with the regulation amendment, the time frames for consideration are longer. I believe it's 90 days or
It's
120.
65 days to begin a hearing, 35 days to complete, 65 days to act. And the
So-
site plan is 65 days total.
Right. So it's a pretty substantial difference, right? 65 plus 65 is 130,
Right.
plus 35 is 170. So
Right.
it's like 170 days from beginning to end, whereas the application only comprising a site plan, it's 65 days from the time that we receive the application, which is tonight, until we have to decide the matter, which means if we choose to have a public hearing, we have to have the public hearings and bring the matter back onto our agenda for our executive session to decide the matter. So, which is why we circulated the email to see if we had some other dates to try to accommodate what we anticipate is more than one session of public hearing. Right. If we don't decide the matter within that 65-day time period, it is deemed allowed. So we have to act. Otherwise, it's approved by automatically. Yes, Commissioner
I
Barrett.
just concerns about the timeline. I think you explained it very well, Mr. Chairman, that, we're talking about starting in July 8th.
Right.
That's already,
65th day would be
that's
July
already
20.
like 50 days from now.
Right. July 24th would be the date by which you would need to take
We would
it.
have to decide at our second meeting, our second scheduled meeting in July, by our second scheduled meeting.
Right.
It'd be July 22nd.
Correct.
So, the time frame, that's why, so, I mean, I will get back to the Joanne on my availability. It's important that we're already talking about starting it far out, but we'd have to finish it within 2 weeks there.
Right.
And, as we know, sometimes applications take a while to be presented and discussed. So, I mean, I have no issue with the movement. I think we definitely need a public hearing on it.
Are you suggesting that we start it sooner?
I wish we could start it. I don't think we can, given the other things on our docket. I'm just, concerned about being pressured,
Yeah.
the time we might need to just hear this.
Right.
But I also understand the difference in the statutes which is good. Thank you for pointing out regarding, a zone change and what that entails. And on an 830G application, the application does not have to submit a zone change. By definition, it does not have to comply to our regulations. They can
Right.
submit a site plan, which is what they decided to do. So I support the move to public hearing and just, have some concerns about the timeline.
Commissioner Francis?
We have to, the consensus seems to be we want to have a public hearing, but we have to accept it now because it's within so many days of when he applied. I mean,
We
The
don't...
day- the-
yeah, I'd like to
yeah.
put it off.
The
because it's
statutory
so
date of
much.
receipt is today, whether you
Yeah.
vote this to public hearing
Okay.
tonight or not.
Right.
It's the date of the next regular scheduled
Okay.
meeting
So you
after we
only have
receive it, or
65
30
days to
days,
make a
whichever occurs
decision.
first.
Right. So we are, the motion is to decide whether to have a public hearing. It is not to decide the day, but we're trying to get ahead of that a little bit, in terms of the dates, so that we can be sure that we can complete it within the time. Because once we decide to have a public hearing, then, we have to do that.
Right.
We need to do that.
Right, the message is to just check your calendars and let us know your availability so we can schedule accordingly.
Right. Okay. So, just for the purposes of discussion, I wholeheartedly support our, having a public hearing on this. Part of the reason why we're talking about additional days is because we do anticipate a substantial amount of public comment. It's a significant application, so we should have a public hearing.
Yeah, I was going to say, if anything, we should try and find another day to start it a week earlier.
Okay?
It's going to be a busy application.
We can-
It's
we
gonna
can
be-
talk about that.
Yeah, we have to
Yeah.
talk about that, but
But that's not for...
We have it back to it, right?
Right. Okay. All right. Are we ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? So the item is moved to public hearing unanimously. Next section on our agenda is compliance applications. It's 260 Post Road. It's the application of Costa Proskinitopoulos. That's pretty good.
That's better than I could have done.
To establish 150 square feet of outdoor dining in a design commercial district. This is Craft 260.
Right, if you're not familiar with where we're talking about, beyond, this is the piece of Post Road that's beyond the traffic circle between the traffic circle and Fairfield Avenue. There are two buildings here. This is the left-hand-most tenant in the left-hand-most building, and for a long time it was King and I Asian restaurant. It's now Craft 260. If you're familiar with that building, there's an overhang that covers the sidewalk out in front, and they're looking to establish a 150 square foot patio pursuant to our regulations in front of their space for outside dining. It does not require any additional parking under our regulations.
And just from my review, it appeared to be compliant with our regulations.
Yes.
Have a motion?
I make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi,
Second.
second by Commissioner Francis. Any discussion? Commissioner Corcoran.
Which regulation is it that covers this?
We recently, the commission recently amended the regs a year or so ago to the parking regulations to allow up to 150 square feet of outdoor dining without any incremental parking. If there are restaurants that have more than 150 square feet, and if they do have more than that, then for every 40 square feet of patron space, it requires parking space. What we had experienced is a number of the existing outdoor dining establishments had gone for variance to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and oftentimes it's not necessarily an increase in volume of diners, it's just a choice whether to eat indoors or outdoors, and particularly for some of the smaller establishments, to do a small, and we have a couple that are less than 150 feet, to give them an opportunity without having to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. But the larger patios that are greater than 150 feet, need to provide supplemental parking.
Do you remember the regulation number for that?
It's 28.6.12, I want to say. It's where it says, the current, in the book, it'll say, restaurant parking requires one space for every 40 square feet of patron space. The amendment was to allow up to 150 square feet of outdoor dining without requiring any incremental parking.
Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I would support this application. This is the old, it used to be, I think, a Thai restaurant, I believe.
It was, yes.
And, yeah, I mean, just.
Before that, it was DeRosa's and other tenants.
Yeah, and I'm in an ongoing effort to really promote, we've been trying to promote outdoor dining and successfully in our town. You know, I mean, this commission decided whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, and that was the reason for the reg change too, is we wanted to have it even easier for these small outdoor dining setups to be approved on a seasonal basis. So I don't see any reason to not, the only reason usually we don't support it if there's some sort of a traffic issue or if it's placed inappropriately, or we had a few sunny days, yes. Yeah, where we had to go back and have them construct something differently than what they
And we would recommend that if it would be subject to the standard conditions, which is the 1-year recertification, that we do an annual recertification, that there be no additional signage and the other standard conditions that are the April 1 through the end of October timeframe.
Can I ask, what was the problem with the Sunny Days application?
Mr. Alessio, Mr. Wagner remembers.
Yeah,
You had tables and chairs right against the parking lot. Kids could have got hurt.
Isn't that kind of what this is?
Well,
There's
A little bit different.
yeah.
It's
It's a
different?
little bit different.
Sunny Days ultimately revised the application and was approved. Their initial application had some concerns that were raised, and they went back and kind of revamped created a barrier between the parking lot and the curb.
There wasn't even a curb stop between the cars and the tables.
So in this case, it's underneath an overhang?
There's an overhang, there's a raised curb
Yeah,
and
okay.
columns on the storefront that this would
Okay.
separate it from the parking lot. It's not, the Sunny Days proposal in present it's flush. The surface of the seating is flush with the parking lot.
So a car could just accidentally go into it?
Well, and the way that the cars were, so if the seating was here, the spaces were along this side, and so a car had to pull into the spot, and in order for them to back out, the car, and there was just not enough room there,
Right.
and there was no curb stop, there was no separation, it was flush with the entryway, and so ultimately they put up a railing and they put up curb stops and revised it. So they also, in that case, came to us after the fact. They had already put tables and chairs out and without a compliance application, and so that was an issue as well. So, any other discussion on the item? No? Ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item is 1865 Blackrock Turnpike, the application of J.P. Franzen Associates to establish 150 square feet of outdoor dining in a design commercial district. This is Tuscany.
Okay, to orient you here, this is the building in which Billy's Bakery is on the corner of Blackrock and Katona. On the lower level in the rear, there's a parking lot and storefronts. That's where Tuscany is, on the lower level. In this case, the sidewalk is flush with the pavement, so they're proposing to install some bollards here to protect this area and to actually extend the sidewalk out a little bit into that one-way aisle. They've given you a blow-up that was in your packet, and tonight on the table there's a bigger picture survey view of how that lays out within the site. They do have the room to do this, and they are proposing some appropriate protection to separate the vehicular access from the seating. It's proposed to be 150 square feet with some, the canvas screening. And again, we would propose the same standard conditions, no additional signage in the one-year recertification along with the other standard conditions.
Now that you mention that, I don't know if that was clear in the last item, but was the motion, who made the motion on the last item?
I did.
Commissioner Leslie, was your motion including all the standard conditions?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, all right, so we note that for the record. Okay. Mr. Went, you
I'm all set, Mr.
all
Chairman.
set? Okay. Can I have a motion? Motion approved by Commissioner Coleman, second by Commissioner Jacobson. So this is similar to the last application. Any discussion? Commissioner Jacobson?
Yeah, I think
Mic-
it's a good
microphone.
place for it, as long as it,
Microphone.
I think it's a good place for outdoor dining, but again, they are gonna put separations, because right now, there's no separation between the parking, but they're gonna put barriers there, right?
Yes, they've got a detail of that on the plan.
Right, I can see, okay.
Yeah, the second small page in the packet
Yes,
is,
okay.
that's columns and
Yeah.
bollards,
Oh, I can go with that.
screen fabric, awning. No, screen fabric to match the awning, so there will be sort of a
Do you
rail.
have that page? We don't have that.
It's attached to the second, it's behind the letter.
Just a question, how much of this will be temporary in terms of this setup, and how much of it will sit year-round? Like the fabric, is that going to stay up?
That's a good question. The bollards certainly are going to be permanent. The tables and chairs typically, as one of the standard conditions, the tables and chairs are removed in the off-season.
That is
Now, these, there are some that leave their canvas depending on the structure. I don't know whether that's intended to be permanent or removable, but I don't see any harm in it. It doesn't block pedestrian access, so I don't see any harm in having it remain, should they choose to do so.
Yeah, I was thinking more just a visual. There was that one restaurant downtown that constructed that thing that they said they were going to take down, and then they couldn't take it down, and
Right.
they came back for us to amend our conditions so they could leave it up all year. And I really don't, I think in the off-season it doesn't really look good, but it's there, and we approved that, so. I think this is okay where it is. I'm familiar with this site, I drove through it. It's not like right on the street or anything, it's behind the building, so I'm okay.
that we could make it a condition of approval that the, the additional canvas and railing be taken down.
But then what stays out, the railing and not the canvas? Does the whole thing come back? Is anybody here from the applicant?
Can't do that. It's a compliance application. Yeah, but we can't take testimony on a compliance application. We have to notice it as a public hearing, which I don't believe that's necessary.
I don't have any.
And I think
don't
that
have
our
any problem
standard
with
conditions require the removal of the tables and chairs and the appurtenant items, and that, this is it's a nice design. I think it's a value. I mean, I would support approval of the application with the standard conditions.
I concur.
Mr. Francis, is your motion is with all the standard conditions for outdoor dining?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Commissioner Jacobson?
Yeah.
Yes, second. Any other?
I was saying you're going to have them remove the...
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
Move the what?
The awnings, the tables, the chairs. With
So you want the screening to be removed in the off-season in addition to the tables and chairs?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Nope.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The item carries unanimously as stated. The next item is 226 Kings Highway East, application of Howard Greenspan to install 9 mini golf balls outside an existing retail store in a design commercial district.
Okay, this property is on the corner of Kings Highway and Villa Avenue. There's an aerial kind of view of that kind of pointed intersection. It currently houses a children's toy store called Giant Steps, and they are proposing as an amenity for their customers 9 holes of mini golf, but they are smaller holes than a typical miniature golf. It would be between the building and their picket fence. They are not proposing to charge admission, but just to allow folks to come on in and get the materials and go out and play. It's outdoors. It's not certain that it falls within the range of permitted uses, so we placed it on the agenda for your consideration.
Yes, Commissioner Olson.
Make a motion to deny.
Motion to deny by Commissioner Alessi.
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Corcoran. Open for discussion. Commissioner Alessi, you want to start?
Yeah, and number one, I don't think this, A, is a permitted use, and B, on this corner, it's very dangerous. I know when I was a kid, I would launch golf balls, so I could see a kid launching a golf ball into traffic, and then somebody causes an accident someplace over here, so I don't think this is a safe idea. I heard there was talk of netting, but balls will still get out, and I would hate to see a kid get hit right here playing miniature golf on this busy street, so I urge my fellow commissioners to deny this application.
I mean, I'm also concerned about the balls impacting the cars. Right?
That too.
I mean, but anyone else have any comments on this?
That's my feeling too, is the balls are going to end up in the street. Are there going to be people chasing them, or?
You know, the letter of intent says that there will be a 6-inch high, unnoticeable mesh on the inside from the ground to prevent stray balls going into the street, and I believe it's like a picket fence. 6 inches, that's ridiculous. And the photos are in Exhibit C. You know, this is not related to the business. I mean, the business is a retail toy store. This is an amusement to attract customers. It's not a permitted use. I support denial of the application. I would hate to think of what other businesses might also come up with to try to attract customers like this. This intersection is incredibly busy. It's just not appropriate. Commissioner Jacobson?
I was going to say the same thing. I would vote to deny it because it does set a precedent allowing other businesses to do this. And I did drive by there, and it's an incredibly busy intersection, and I would vote to deny it.
Yeah. I mean, the letter of intent also says, you know, while they're not going to charge, they still need to check out the equipment by showing a driver's license, etc. So, I mean, they're actually coming in and registering, you know. It is even though they're giving away the access for, you know, no charge, it's still an operation, you know. It's not permitted. Any other comments? No? Okay, the motion on the table is to deny the application, so a vote in favor is a denial, just so we're all clear. All in favor of denying the application signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The item is denied unanimously. Next item is public hearings. For the members of the public that are here, we have 4 items on for public hearing. We're going to take them in the order that they're on the agenda: Bronson Road, Romanov Road, Sherman Street, and then Chester Place. We'll take a few minutes to reorient the mics, and then we'll begin. So, meeting's adjourned for just a few minutes.
Yeah, nothing's changed.
The thing is, though, I
We
mean,
had no choice. Well, actually, we had a choice. We could have decided not to have a public hearing. Legally, that's what we, yeah.
but whatever.
Yeah. Speech. That's good move.
All right. Call the meeting back to order. For the members of the public that are here, the way this works is the applicant will give their presentation. We will move to a public comment. Everyone will have a chance that wants to be heard. There's no time limit. We just ask that you keep your comments germane to the issues, a couple of minutes, so long as you keep it focused. Say whatever you need to and however long you need to take. The applicant then has the final word in a rebuttal, and then once the applicant concludes the rebuttal, the public hearing is closed, and then it will be on our next agenda for consideration in our executive session. And we'll do that for each one of the items on our agenda. So the first matter is 1876 Bronson Road. It's the application of 1876 Bronson Road LLC for facade improvements in a neighborhood design district. Mr. Franzen?
Good evening. I'm Jack Franzen. I'm here to represent,
Can you just check your microphone?
yeah, it's not,
I think it's on.
yeah, it's just not close enough. That'll be better.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Jack Franzen. I'm here to represent 1876 Bronson Road LLC for the proposed facade improvements. The property that we are addressing is in the neighborhood design district. And in addition to giving you my name, my address happens to be 2760 Congress Street, and I've lived in Greenfield Hill for 11 years. And I drive by this place, and as far as I can remember, there haven't been any kind of improvements on this property as long as I've lived in Greenfield Hill. And in fact, I don't think there's been much maintenance either. The opportunity presents itself in early summer that the one remaining tenant of the Mercado will be vacating, and it'll be an opportunity for the building to essentially get a facelift. Currently, it's known as the Mercado. You're all familiar with it. Having said that, it is a major facelift, since it has been a while since anything's been done. And this is sort of the poor stepchild of the whole commercial area there, because if you know the other buildings, they're mostly brick on all four sides. In this building, for some reason, there's only brick on one side, and then the other sides are just stucco, which are kind of painted red, and then the roof is really falling apart, and there's all kinds of bad-looking equipment and garbage around the building. So the purpose of this work is really to attract a similar type of use, but a much better, more attractive tenant who would be basically a food market. I think of something like the pantry, and a place where you could go and get meals and groceries on a neighborhood scale, not a supermarket scale. The proposed work consists of, in terms of the building, improvements such as recladding the entire exterior of the building with a combination of the board and batten, which is the brown color, and then on the lower half of the southerly part of the building, going up about 2/3 of the height, is a rectangular stone veneer that we're going to try and make look like the stone walls at Country Day and the Fleischman's Barn on Hillside Road. The existing building, as I said, is just brick on the one side, and then there's actually a recess which is stucco painted red. We're also proposing new windows and new doors throughout all the sides of the building. We're proposing new roof dormers on all four sides, which will have copper-cladded standing seam roofs. We're also proposing a parapet in the middle where the two ridges intersect, and that's going to be where the mechanical equipment goes with a railing around it to screen the mechanicals.
So all the mechanicals will be screened from public view?
That's correct. And currently, I think there's some window air conditioning units on the back of the building. There may be one air conditioning unit on the side, and then there's the ice machine, well, that's going to go too. And then there's another little wood enclosure that I think might have mechanicals in it on the west side. That's all going to go. The relocation of the sign that we show on the facade, excuse me, it's really a placeholder because we do not have a tenant at this time. And we don't have any proposed lighting, again, because we don't have a tenant. But we are proposing to remove all the existing lighting. There's some very unattractive floodlights. There's one in the apex here, and then there's some scattered around the eaves. So we're taking all the exterior lighting off of the building, and once we have a tenant, we would come back to you with a signing and lighting proposal. We're also proposing a cupola on the apex of the building facing south. So all in all, the whole building is going to look different. It's going to look totally different, as good or better compared to the ones that are already in the rest of the neighborhood business district. On the site plan, which my associate Dave Wojtowicz just is showing you now, you can see the proposed landscaping. There are some existing landscaping beds, and we're proposing new plantings in there. The plantings that are there now are all overgrown. Where there's just sidewalk, we are planning to put some window boxes. And actually, there are window boxes on the existing building, but they're kind of deteriorated, so these will be new ones. We're also proposing to adapt the sidewalks. We're using the existing sidewalks, but we're going to adapt them so they'll be ADA compliant. The other thing that we're doing on the site is, right now you have a choice of seeing dumpster enclosure either on the east or the west side of this property. And since the neighbor's recycling enclosure is on the east side, we are proposing to move ours to the east side so they're together. Their enclosure is actually on our property, so if there's any way we can get them to cooperate with us and move it off of our property, we would like to do that. But also, our enclosure is going to be a board-on-board design. It's not going to be the cyclone fence with the plastic strips on it. It's going to be a very attractive board-on-board enclosure. The other thing that we're proposing on the site is to, we have to comply with the bike storage requirements for this zone. And so by moving the recycling enclosure, we have room for 3 bike racks, which is what we are required to have. And I'm on the Bike and Pedestrian Commission, so that was one of the first things I mentioned to the client.
And our new regulation amendments.
Will be to you I think it's next week, right?
Yeah.
So also the bike racks are visible from the road, which is important because we don't want bike racks to be put in a place where you can't see them. So there are a couple that you could very easily see, and then there's one more behind those two. I did mention the proposed landscaping beds. The building itself, there's no change in square footage. I think the building now is 3,900 square feet, of which 550 square feet is a upstairs office. There's no change of use. It's going to be a market, and the office will be for the market, not for somebody else.
So right now, the Mercado's in the front, and then what used to be Pickett's.
And Trayvon.
And those are both vacant now, right?
Correct. So the whole floor plate will be the market.
So you envision, not you, but I guess the owner envisions combining those 3 together for one market.
Correct. And there may be some leveling that we have to do to get, because I'm not sure the floors are exactly leveled, but they will be leveled. So that's really the only difference from what's there now. There
Okay,
is
so
a-
no changes to the square footage, no changes to ingress, egress?
That's correct.
Doors, we're not moving doors around or anything like that?
And there's no second floor other than what exists. Yeah, we actually are closing on the Trey Bond side a couple doors, but we've got a door here, we've got a door here. We comply with Connecticut code on egress and ingress.
Okay.
There was a small basement that's for storage, it's just, for the market. So there's no second floor. Those dormers that I showed you, they're for light, because we envision a high ceiling in there, sort of like a Whole Foods feeling where it's vaulted with some beams or trusses. So
Commissioner Alessi?
You're gonna have a kitchen in there?
there will be probably food preparation, yes, because they might probably sell meals to go, like you can go to the pantry and get dinner, entrees.
There's food preparation and a kitchen currently, in the Mercado.
Yes.
I know there's a grill, and the deli counter, and the like.
Yeah,
case.
I don't imagine the plan will be, I imagine there'll be more produce and fresh foods in there, but again, we don't have a tenant.
Right. Okay.
So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions for the applicant? No? All right. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
President.
you.
So we'll open the floor to public comment. Is there any member of the public that wishes to be heard on this application? Yes. Yeah. Just state your name and address for the record, and the floor is yours.
Linda Snell, Moore, 442 Bronson Road. What is the square footage?
The applicant said it's about 3,900 square feet. Very good. Thank you. Sir?
Gary Peterson, 14 Hillside Road. I lived across the street from the Mercado, and it's a tremendous improvement. So we like the notion. Just a few questions. One is, garbage has always been a problem. It's always blowing across the yard. There was one year where our neighbor had their entire interior of their car eaten out by rats when we had a rat problem. So it gets pretty bad. And I would just make sure that it's always contained. I've tried calling the town many, many times to get them to close the gate, close the dumpster. Never happens. So whatever can be done to control the garbage, we'd appreciate it. Number two on the garbage is, I just heard that the garbage is going to be placed on the east side. Well, the east side faces residents, several residents. The west side faces the old bank and a commercial area. And I'm sure all the residents on the east side, which is Hillside, would prefer that the garbage be placed on the more accessible and better situated west side. I say more accessible because Bronson, it's easier to get in to the garbage from that side, I believe. The next point is the lighting. There is some non-compliant lighting in the area. As I understand it, everything has to shoot down. But I've made complaints before, and nothing's been changed with the bank parking that is more of a flood and shoots across. So we just want to make sure that it's fully compliant and that limited lighting is left on at night, because it can be very bright if they leave all the lights on. And then number three is, while we all seem in the neighborhood to support the idea of a market, we've talked to Spick and Span, we've talked to the pantry, neither one is interested, and I just didn't know if there's any, they say they want a market. I don't know if that's a guarantee or a wish, and what the other options would be that they would allow into that space. Okay?
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to be heard on this application?
Hi, I'm Jody Peterson. I also live at 14 Hillside Road, and shows my husband's and my communication skills that I forgot to mention one thing that I wanted him to ask. But about the security, Now there's a grate that's pulled down. We've lived in this house for over 30 years, and there have been many, many occasions where I've called 911 in the middle of the night because the store was being broken into. Since they've put down the metal grate, that's no longer an issue, but of course it's not very attractive. So I'd be very happy to be getting rid of that, but and I do know also from having talked to the police in the past that the main reason for all the break-ins were usually because of cigarettes. They were easy to break in, grab, and take and sell. So hopefully if this is a market, that's less of an issue. But I just was curious, Jack, if you're not having
If
the
you
metal
could direct your
grate.
comments here.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, the applicant, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that specifically, but if all the comments could be directed to the commission.
I'm sorry.
The applicant, the purpose of the rebuttal is so that the applicant can hear your questions
Okay.
and concerns and then hopefully respond to them
All right.
in his
So my
rebuttal.
concern is, how do we keep the area secure and safe without it looking like inner city?
Right,
So, thank you.
very good. Thank you. Any other members of the public? Hi there.
Hi, April Klein, 104 Hillside. My concern is the large size generator.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Large size generator. I have one now across my house. So just hoping that Mercado doesn't, or the new tenants put a large size, another generator down the road from me. And also just keeping the integrity of having it, keeping a market versus not, that would be nice. It's an LLC. So
I'm
you
sorry,
can
I
put-
can't hear you.
It's an LLC, so you can put anything you want in there. So as I live 3 doors up, I'd like it to say a market if it can. Those are my concerns. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other members of the public wish to be heard on this application? Yes, sir. Hi.
Hello. Andy Wolf, 150 Hillside Road. I guess it's all been said before, but I just want to reiterate that there are use restrictions for this district. They have not come forth with saying, I guess there's no tenant yet, but we want to be very careful that their tenant does fall within those categories, and also that any kind of lighting plan, there is a lot of non-compliant lighting in that area, and I still can't figure out who I should be talking to in the town to get that taken care of, but want to make sure that their lighting doesn't go in non-compliant so it doesn't turn into another 10-year fight.
Right,
So,
right.
thank
No,
you.
I understand. And typically we don't address, but, so those were non-compliant because they were there for so long, and the applicant has said in his statement that they're planning on taking all of that lighting down, and then when they put new lighting in, it will have to be compliant with our regulations, which are downward facing, minimalist, et cetera. So it's a good thing. Any other members wish to be heard?
Hi, Christina Marson, North Cedar Road. I would just ask that the integrity of the Mercado be kept, and with so many families around the area, that we be mindful of the fact that there are small children around that area, and we don't look to change it in any way, shape, or form that might hinder or hurt our children down the road, either by, I don't know, sexual offenders or whatever. But just keep the family nature of the building to be a family nature, not a business of other sort. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to be heard on this application?
You didn't put lights on the buildings, right?
Sorry, one other item, we didn't hear anything about the parking, so we'd like to hear more about that.
Okay. Any other members of the public wish to be heard? Going once, going twice. Okay. Mr. Franzen, rebuttal?
Yes, I'd like to respond to the questions and comments. This is neighborhood business, so our intent is that we're going to comply with that, and if you approve it, it's for what we're asking for, not to...
Tilt that microphone up.
Not
Thank
to, be moving a chain store or anything like that in here. The intent is that it's a market. There will not be any grates like the Canal Street type grates that you see there in our proposal. The point on dumpsters is good, and it hadn't occurred to me. Unfortunately, the other building has theirs on Hillside, but we'd be perfectly happy as a condition if you wanted us to move the enclosure over to the other side where it is now, and then we would just move our bike racks onto the east side, which I think could be almost as good. It's just I wish we could get all the refuse in one area so it isn't on both sides, but I think that was a good point. Garbage, I think we are going to have as good a garbage recycling enclosure as we can, and I think it's going to be up to the tenant to, I would think they would want to impress their neighbors with cleanliness, and that would be an important thing.
Yeah.
Lighting, as we said, we're getting rid of all the existing lighting, and whatever we come back with, it's going to comply with the cutoff type lighting that you like. The parking that we have is the existing parking. We don't think that, well, first of all, some of the parking is on town property now. It's just grandfathered. It's the way it's always been. And we're not proposing to change it, because if we do, then we own it. And
I presume that's one of the reasons why you're not proposing to change the square footage or the footprint of the building at all.
Correct.
Because then you run into issues
Correct.
around the blacktop.
Yeah, when we first sat down, we were thinking of all different kinds of things, and we said, we really, number one, I think it works, if the right tenant is there, it works fine, and number two, if we touch it, then everything changes, and it's sort of a, pre-existing condition.
Right.
Talked about the grade, talked about the use. I can't think of anything else that was brought up, but...
Well, another question was around safety. So there is a roll cage now that comes down, and you had mentioned that being taken away and not replaced. So perhaps you could just speak to safety issues for the building.
Well, I don't know if they're planning to sell tobacco, but I know that where I lived in Southport, it was a problem also.
Mm-hmm.
That was why the people broke in. But there are, I just heard on CNBC the other day, there's something called drop cam. It's like, so, anybody can do it. You could do it in your backyard. It's a real-time security camera that you can, so if you're a small business owner, you could have on your iPhone, picture of your business wherever you are, 24/7. So I would think between maybe not having tobacco and having a high-tech security system like what you can get today, and I don't know what they have now, you could monitor it much better, and hopefully that wouldn't be a recurring problem.
Okay.
Other than that, I really can't, I don't know what you could do. I think tobacco is the attraction.
Anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah. Sort of a question for the applicant or for staff, but, this is a compliance application for the facade improvements.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, procedurally how this, and, we've heard from the public that they'd like to see another market in there, and assuming that happens, that's not a change in use or anything, so how can we be sure, as that wouldn't really come before us, how can we be sure that that the lighting is compliant? We can attach that as conditions of approval to this application. Because it will never come. It'll never come back before us if it's a market that I know of, unless they change the building.
Right. Jim Wendt for the record. Our neighborhood design district regulations has a fairly specific, limited listing of retail uses that are permitted. The building is completely retail, so as long as it is a tenant that falls within that list of retail uses, it wouldn't be considered a change of use. Does it have to, their intent is it to be a market. Is it required to be a market? No, it could be a retail use that's within that list. It could be a retail clothing store, for example. But as long as it's within that realm, it can't be some other types of retail uses that we don't permit. It's a neighborhood district, and there's this distinct list that would have to comply with.
So as long as it stays within 12.5.1, it's not a change in use?
Correct.
Right, I understand.
Right.
I misspoke when I said it was going to be a market, but a market is there under
It is.
fruits, vegetables, meat, sandwiches. It meets
Correct.
a lot of those criteria that are actually really specified in this section.
Right.
So I just question is how we make sure that the lighting is compliant. Do we make a condition of this particular approval if we were to approve this application?
Well,
How do you approve a lighting plan that you haven't seen is my question.
Right. Typically, they come in the building permit process, they need a permit to establish lighting. We review it at that point to make sure it's complying with our standards. If it's something that you want to see, rather than a staff level review, you can make that a condition that they return to you with the lighting plan if that is your desire. But,
Okay.
but typically, that's something that we would review in-house, but we can do it either way.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wett. Sorry, Mr. Franzen.
No, I think that's what you wanted to say.
That's correct.
Just didn't have it at your fingertips.
We're happy with that answer.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? No? All right, very good.
Thank you very much.
All right. Close the public hearing on that matter. Next item for public hearing is 50 Romanov Road, special permit application of Robert and Catherine Stezkowski for excavation and fill in an A zone.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is John Fallon. I'm here tonight representing the applicants, Kate and Robert Stezkowski, who are, Robert actually was called out of town unexpectedly on a business trip, but Kate is seated right behind all the cameras there. And next to her is Ted Kozlowski, who I'll be referring to, who we retained to help us put this application together. Robert and Catherine are the owners of the property, 50 Romanov Road. They reside there with their 2 young children. As I pointed out in my statement of use, they constructed a home on the property in 2011. In fact, Mr. Stezkowski's father actually constructed the home. In June of 2012, the Stezkowskis, unaware of the provisions of Section 24, had an opportunity to bring fill and regrade their rear yard in order to make it more level and, most importantly, more usable for them as a family and especially for their children. They were, as I said, unaware of the provisions of Section 24. I've known the Stezkowskis personally for a very long time. They are the most by-the-book people I know. So this is an embarrassment to them, has been. But what they did immediately when Matt contacted them was they ceased everything. They stopped immediately any activity. They were told they needed to make a Section 24 permit application. They had numerous meetings out at the site with Mr. Decker and also Scott Lemon, the surveyor for the town engineering department. And as a result of those meetings, they then hired Ted Kozlowski to work with the zoning and engineering departments to resolve the matter and prepare a proposed plan for regrading and removal of a portion of the previously deposited fill that had satisfied the town engineering department, which I'll get to in a second. But it's very important for me to stress with my personal credibility knowing the Stezkowskis, they weren't trying to do anything. They didn't know they needed a permit to level their yard, and when they were told it, they stopped. And they basically stopped in their tracks for the last year and a half. Now, as I point out in my application, Ted Kozlowski's calculations confirm that 1,156 cubic yards was deposited in the rear yard area prior to the notice that they received from the zoning department of the need for a Section 24 permit. The proposal that's before you tonight calls for the removal of 250 cubic yards of this fill and the utilization of approximately 32 square yards of topsoil that's presently stockpiled on the property, and an additional 50 cubic yards of topsoil to regrade the area in question. So the total net fill under this proposal that's before you tonight is 988 cubic yards. Now, what is most important here, and what we've worked closely with the zoning and the engineering department on, is to ensure that what we want to do here, what we ask you to approve, will not have any adverse impact on the abutting property owner. And in fact, the good news in this situation is that we're actually going to have a significant and mitigative improvements to the previously existing site drainage that is actually going to benefit the abutting owner, and while at the same time we're allowed to regrade the yard. Why is that? Number of reasons. First, if you look at the survey that Ted has submitted as part of this application, you'll see that it demonstrates that the original contours of the property, prior to the depositing of the fill, created a swale before the Stezkowskis even bought the property, that directed a high velocity of runoff from the Stezkowskis' property to that of their neighbor, which I'm sure went on for many years, well before the Stezkowskis purchased the property. The grading plan that we ask you approve tonight alleviates that condition by removal of that swale, and that makes the site drainage less intensively focused on our neighbor's property line. Secondly, if you look at the plan that we've submitted, there are 2 new drains which are shown on the survey. They're noted on the survey as existing drains, but they've been new and they've been placed there after consultation with the engineering department. These 2 drains are designed to collect water flows that did not previously exist on the property. Those drains were not there. And the grading plan, as you can see, has been designed to ensure that the site runoff is going to be directed towards those 2 drains. It should also be noted, if you look at the plan carefully, that those 2 drains are located at an elevation that is at a lower point than the neighbor's property. In other words, the neighbor's property is up here, the drains are down here. In addition to that, we've also installed a new stone wall on the property line, and that will also attenuate any runoff. But the drains are really what's going to do the job, as well as the change in the contours. Our plan that we ask you to approve calls for silt fencing along the face of that wall that will remain in place while the regrading process is concluded. And we've also made provisions, of course, for hay bales to be installed in and around the drains prior to any disturbance. And these are also to remain in place until all planting and stabilization has been completed and inspected by the TPZ, the Town Zoning Department, and the Engineering Department. You have in your file a memorandum from Laura Pooley to Jim Wendt, dated February 10, 2014. I think it's the essence of the application, so I'll briefly summarize it without reading it in total. Ms. Pooley says that the proposal that's before you tonight appears to address the concerns that became evident when the residents at 50 Romanov Road filled a portion of the property. The proposal calls for the regrading of the rear in a manner that will direct stormwater runoff into 2 newly installed yard drains set in a swale adjacent to the stone wall along the rear property line. The installation of this drainage system will intercept runoff that previously would have flowed onto the adjacent Renon property, thereby reducing the amount of stormwater that entered that property prior to any earth-moving activities. The yard drains are connected to the town of Fairfield storm drain that flows through the Stezkowski property via a drainage easement and is carried off-site. The measures discussed above to mitigate off-site concerns are appropriate and therefore acceptable to this department. So this is one of those situations where you end up in a win-win, I think. You have people who didn't know they were supposed to get a permit to do something they wanted to do for their family to enjoy the property. When they were told they needed a permit, they stopped. For a year and a half, they've worked closely, hired Mr. Kozlowski with Mr. Decker and the engineering department. But at the end of the day, subject to your approval, they not only get a yard that they had hoped to get under now a legal Section 24 permit, but they actually improve and mitigate a condition that existed to the detriment of their neighbors prior to their ownership of the property. And I think that's the win-win here, that we're doing something now under proper approvals that we very much would like to do to enhance the enjoyment of the property for the Stezkowski family, but at the same time, not only am I standing here and saying, we're not going to do any more harm or any worse for the neighbors, as Laura Pooley confirms, we're going to take a pre-existing condition that the Renowns have had to live with for many years, and we're going to significantly mitigate that. So we'd hope you might approve this.
Thanks. Were the neighbors contacted? Are they aware of the...
Oh, yeah, they're here. They're
here tonight. They plan on speaking?
I can't speak for them, but they're certainly here tonight.
All right. Okay.
And I'll be free to answer any questions.
I'd be interested to understand whether they are in favor of the application or not.
I can't speak to that. I speak through not only my own comments, but Ms. Pooley's.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Fallon.
Thank you.
Are there any members
a
question for Mr. Fallon?
Yes, Mr. Lisi.
Dave, we're talking about the backyard, correct?
Correct.
And we brought the elevation from 96 feet to 106 feet? Is that what we're trying to do here?
Ted, could you come forward? This is Ted Kozlowski, who was our surveyor and engineer who helped us put the project together. Your question?
Yes, I'm sorry.
The elevation was 96 feet. What are you trying to accomplish by bringing it to 106 feet? Is that what you're trying to raise it 10 feet from the back property line?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Your elevation on the map was 96 feet. The elevation of the deck was 106
contour,
feet.
96 contour.
Yeah. You're trying to raise it 10 feet? Was that what you're trying to do?
No.
How high were you
We're
trying to...
raising anything 10 feet. The drains are at...
No, you backfilled. How much did you backfill? 900 yards of dirt, right?
That's the net total when we get done, 988. It's 1156 was the amount that was deposited.
Right.
It wasn't deposited down at the
Do you know what you
bottom of
changed the
hill,
elevations?
farther up the hill.
You know what you changed the elevation from before to now?
But it varies.
It varies depending on...
We showed on the plan, I think, pre-existing contours, existing, so that we could make the calculations in terms of what the total still was.
The greatest deficit is maybe 3 or 4 feet in any one spot.
There was no one point, Commissioner, where, we increased the grade by 10 feet. There was 1,156 cubic yards deposited before notice. Spread out over the entire backyard. When we received notice of that, and knowing the concern of the neighbors, we started to work with Mr. Kosowski, with the engineering department, to come up with a plan that would allow a regrading here that, as I said before, would mitigate a pre-existing drainage problem. And the way we did that, as spelled out in my statement of use and Ms. Pooley's comments, is we were able to create contours and those two drains that really eliminated a pre-existing swale that created a great velocity of runoff. We built the wall, and so at the end of the day, the fill here is actually going to have a beneficial effect in terms of eliminating a pre-existing problem with regard to unmitigated drainage from our site to the neighbors before we open.
And I think the greatest depth of fill in any one spot is probably about 4 feet, but that's mostly in that area, if you see just to the left of the topsoil pile.
Right.
Where the contours have sort of where the swale shows. That would be the greatest depth there, but over the rest of it, it's much less.
What did you use for the fill? Where did you get it from?
The fill was brought in by Mr. Stezkowski, who was the father of, the fill was been carefully inspected by the engineering department and the zoning department. The fill was clean fill. I mean, he was filling the backyard for his grandchildren.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
I have a question. Do the drains take the water someplace, or are they just retention?
No, as Ms. Pooley's email indicates, the drains are tied into the town system and will take the water through the town system off of the property through an easement that's on the Stezkowski's property that's existed for many years.
So this stone wall isn't likely to result in water running out onto the road?
No, I don't mean to speak for Ms. Pooley, but Ms. Pooley felt the storm wall was another element along with the regrading and the new drains that would actually attenuate any impact of runoff onto the neighbor's property. The wall would act as a deterrent.
Thank you.
The grade actually slopes down from the road, so it's not going to flow onto the road.
And those drains, as I said in my statement, if you look at the the elevations are set at a lower point on the Stezkowski property than the Renault property. So it'll funnel right into those drains, which was not the fact before, because if you looked at the pre-existing contours, I never saw the lot before, but if you study the contours, there was just a swale that would create a pretty good runoff of velocity right onto the Renault property, and I assume that's what happened for many years.
So, just say roughly 1,000, right, 1,000.
1156 was the original deposition, and this is 988.
Right, so I mean, this is rough numbers, 1,000. Right. How many dump trucks is 1,000?
I can't tell you that. I don't know. I guess it would...
Nobody?
988.
With 988 yards?
Yeah.
1,000 cubic yards.
Typical dump truck is 7.
7 cubic yards?
20 on a 10-wheel is 20.
Depends on the size of it, but I don't know. It depends on the size of the truck. I was going to say, as Mr. Craigwood said, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 cubic yards.
20, so that means we're talking about 50, give or take.
I don't know, but
50 dump trucks full of fill.
At the end of the day, however,
that's a lot of dirt.
I wasn't there, but I don't dispute that it is. I mean, your regulations require a permit for anything, as you know, over 250 cubic yards. We're looking for a permit to legalize 988 cubic yards. The 2 points I don't dispute. It's a lot, but I will say this to you. I really, really believe, and what I believe doesn't matter, but I think what Ms. Pooley believes does. I think at the end of the day, forget what we do for our property. We have created a better situation for the neighbors. And the alternative to that, if you want to talk about disruption in counting the dump trucks, is to haul it all out. And I think at the end...
You know what, that honestly, Mr. Fallon, you should know better than most. You know, that's not appropriate. Yeah, it is the alternative. It is. And when folks come in and say, oh, it's already built, what are you going to do? Are you going to make me take it away? You know, that falls on deaf ears.
Except in this case, respectfully, I think it would be counterproductive, not only to our desires, but also the neighbor's interests.
Yeah, I understand.
If the engineering department had said at any point where we're saying now, this has got to go.
Who is that? Someone? No, thank you. At least it was on vibrate. Although if it was ringing, it would have been easier to figure out. Thank you.
I don't want to be... But
no. Honestly, we get it. We get it. And there's no need to belabor the point. But
and the only other thing
you understand where I'm coming from.
The Stezkowskis are more than just clients. They are friends. They really have worked... They feel bad about this, but, you know, a year and a half since the summer of 2012, they worked with Ted, they worked with Laura Pooley, they worked with Matt, they worked with Mr. Lemon. They want to make it right, not only for them, but for the neighbors. Yeah, I mean, part of the concern, and you know, I really I respect Commissioner Alessi's questions about the dirt, the fill, because part of the concern with the process and the permitting is bringing in fill. Like, where is it from? Right.
Is it contaminated? Does it have, you know, broken pieces of pipe and all kinds?
And that was all carefully analyzed.
Right. And that's not before us.
Right.
Like, I don't see anything relative to that in our packet. You've made the representation that it was vetted by the town, you know, and you know, Mr. Decker and Laura Pooley and whoever. Right. But that, you understand where we're coming from. There's nothing here for us.
I'm sure if there were some issues with the film, Ms. Pooley would be including that in her comment. But clearly, we stopped in our tracks so that everything was there for inspection.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Are there any members of the public that wish to be heard on this application?
My name is Jeffrey Noan. This is my mother's house in question. I've grown up there since I was a little kid. Been there for about 30 years. You been there? 30-something years? 34 years? So I have a couple questions and concerns. See some familiar faces that I've dealt with before. First one is that everybody's saying that they were unaware that a permit was needed. Well, his father's a builder. Doesn't know that you need a permit to bring in over 4 times the amount of fill. That's
If I could just understand where you sit on the map.
we're the Raynouts.
You're the Raynouts. You are the Raynouts.
Yeah.
Okay,
We are.
excellent. Okay, all right.
So that's one concern, is that everything seems to be like, oh, we didn't know, but it's like, your builder, you should know. The fill is not clean. It's full of stumps. It's full of asphalt. Some was brought in by big triaxles. Some was brought in by a small, privately owned dump truck. It's been going on for, I would say, 2 or 3 years, little by little. Fill would come in. Fill would get graded out as soon as it got dark. They'd throw some grass seed on it. So in time, it would look like, hey, that's the way it always was. It kind of got built up over time. Mr. Wendt actually received a time-lapse video recorded from my mother's cupola of 20-plus dump trucks in one day after they're saying that they actually stopped and started to comply. So that's actually not true either. There's an email that indicates that, along with some other photos.
An email was submitted to
to Jim Wendt. That's right. There are photos showing the existing grade. It was never touched from the previous owner. There were also a previous curtain drain installed, which had been raised up. I'm not sure how high, but considerably higher, so that their property used to be below ours. Then it was raised up above when they built approximately a 4-foot retaining wall and actually filled it to the top. And then, so they backfilled the whole thing about 4 feet and kept going from there. And then at some point, the day prior to an inspection, a machine dug everything and pulled it back away, so it didn't look like it was a retaining wall any longer. The retaining wall, incidentally, was also built on my mother's property. It was not on their property, so they did that without any type of survey.
Is the wall still on your mother's property?
The wall was pulled back. I don't know how it was pulled back. They did it in a day. The homeowners did that on their own. They used to have a machine that they would keep on the property, and they would do all the grading and stuff all day long, 7 days a week. So I know that was also a concern of other neighbors. They were tired of hearing machinery, but that's not what we're here to completely discuss.
Yeah, I'm hesitating
Which
to
seems
ask
to be
them
a
questions.
question.
I know. There's a lot more information that I'd like to understand.
I'm sure there is, and I'd be happy to answer it. I'm sure there's some other information that might be available as well, too. Another concern is, had they come to you today and said, hey, we want to bring in 1,100 yards of fill plus, which I can tell you it's more than that, but that's being conservative. Would you guys approve that today? Would you say, yeah, we'll let you bring in that much fill, when that's kind of a lot? And if I was driving 4 times the speed limit, I'm sure that would be a big deal. Bringing in 4 times the amount of fill doesn't seem to be a big deal. It's like, oh, it was already there, so we'll just leave it. So that seems to be a concern. And why would you only take out 250 if you've brought in over 1,100 illegally? Another point that I do want to bring up is that since I've been there, I've never seen any water in their basement. 4 times in the past year and a half since the majority of that fill was brought in, I've been in her basement just with shop vacs just sucking out water and sucking out water. They did put in additional drains, but they are higher than the drain that used to exist. I don't know if I have anything else for you guys. I would like to see a proposed grading plan. There never has been one in the past, and I would like to see exactly what it is that they would be doing.
Do you have a copy of the application that's before us?
I have a statement of use, and do you have a copy of the application?
So that's available.
Okay. Additionally, whatever excavation will be done, it would be nice to see some hay bales and some silt fences this time. There was none of that done prior, and I'm not sure if it was a town or if a private contractor had to come out and literally suck all of the fill that had filled up the drainage easement. It was completely full. So that would be nice to see that drainage protected prior to any construction this time. Is there anything else you wanted me to address? Yeah, I don't know that that's completely relevant to the fill, but the wall was done without a survey, and then my mother had to pay for her own survey to get them to remove the wall from her property. And there was also a voicemail left on her answering machine that says that was incorrect and that they were going to let them build that, and we shouldn't tell them they should move the wall because our wall was actually on their property, so we had a survey done and proved that they were trespassed. So that's all I have for you this evening, but it is definitely a grave concern. I think to say that they're going to improve her property or improve the drainage, it's so far-fetched because it's already so bad that even to remove what they're projecting is still worse than before they started, and all of it was done without a permit.
So you're opposed to the application?
Oh yeah, I'm not opposed to the application. I'm just opposed to the amount. I don't understand why they should be allowed to leave approximately 1,000 yards still there when it was all brought in without a permit.
Do you have water problems now?
Yeah.
You're getting water onto your property now?
Yeah,
You didn't have before?
it's filling up the basement.
It's filling the basement now. Okay.
And are you saying that never happened before?
Not as long as I can remember. I know that the only time I can recall any water is that there was a pipe that had broke a couple of years ago upstairs on the first floor, or the bathroom overflowed. That's the only time I can ever recall water being in that basement.
But that's internally in your house.
Correct.
We're talking
Now
about.
you're getting
Correct.
water in the basement.
Correct. Even just last week, I probably pulled, 20 gallons out of the basement. Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to be heard? With that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Fallon.
A couple of points. First of all, we have to categorically deny that there was some process here where Phil was being brought in over 3 years. What you need to understand in that regard is this is a new house. The house was under construction for approximately 2 years prior to the 2012 notice, okay? So there was a lot of site activity, and I'm sure that was visible, but there was a new house under construction. And Mr. Stezkowski, the father, was doing this on a GC basis for his daughter. He's not a builder. He'd never built a home before, so, I mean, I think that has some relevance, too. So first of all, and foremost of all, this business about them sneaking in at night and so on and so forth, these people are not that kind of people. They were building a house. When the house was built, they moved into the house in early 2012. In the spring of 2012, ill-advised and without knowledge, they brought in Phil to do the yard. Mr. Decker called and they stopped. And I can't speak to, videos to Mr. Wendt, Mr. Decker. I know
I haven't seen those yet.
when we were contacted, we stopped, okay? Now,
Mr. Wendt, is that email video in the record? You don't recall receiving such an email from the Raynones? I mean, I just need to understand whether or not that's part of the record or not.
It's not part of the record.
Okay.
They presented, I don't recall whether I received it via an email or not at some point in time, but I did see a series of photographs that clearly demonstrated that there was fill activity going on, which resulted in the enforcement action that we took. So I don't think anybody disputes that they filled the property. That's not in dispute. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at the dates if there was in fact an email, but in my opinion, it's not particularly germane. There was a fill violation. They're here to try to remedy that in their proposal. So nobody's disputing the fact that there was fill. Yes, we saw a lot of pictures and we acted. I don't recall whether that was before or after the date that we first contacted the property owner.
Okay. So thank you.
And what I would say to that, too, is when we were contacted, we stopped. And the question about, this was going on for 3 years, there was a house being built there for 2 years, and the activity that goes with the house, okay? That's number one. Number two, Mr. Rowan absolutely has every right to see a grading plan, and as you know, there is a grading plan, and that may have been overlooked in the file, but he should have every opportunity to see that, because at the end of the day, the grading plan does benefit him. You're going to have to make a decision here, with all due respect. I don't believe And I don't accept the fact that their basement has been bone dry. And since these things that have been done, which Ms. Pooley speaks to in her email, they now have wet basements. I don't accept that.
The question I have on that point is whether these drains are currently active in the property.
They are, absolutely.
So the benefit that should be seen, as Ms. Pooley expresses, they should be experiencing that now.
Absolutely.
Presently.
And I think they are. And I don't mean to be, but I have to be candid. I cannot, you can accept the testimony of Mr. Rayon, or you can accept the testimony of Ms. Pooley.
Why are you proposing to remove 250 cubic yards?
Just because we could do what we needed to do in terms of the grading to improve the drainage situation with less than 1156. And we wanted to try to remove some in showing some good faith with regard to...
That's what I wanted to know. I wanted to know whether the proposal to remove the fill was an effort to mitigate what you perceive to be, an error, or if that was just part of the plan. We'll bring in all the fill, we'll do our work, and we'll take out what we don't need.
It's the former, and it was also determined after, again, consultation with the engineering department, Mr. Kozlowski, coming up with a plan that would ensure that the contours that are being established on the lot, the drain, the wall, were going to mitigate a pre-existing condition with regard to the drainage. And that's where I have a difficulty and don't accept the testimony of Mr. Rayon, quite honestly, because you can't look at this plan with the mitigative drains that have been created and everything else, and the contours and the removal of that swale, which created a high velocity of runoff, and look at Ms. Pooley's memo and then accept as credible that we've never had water and now we have water in our basement. I don't see how that's physically possible.
I mean, the contour lines do create, continue to create a swale which moves the water towards the Raynone's property, right?
But it funnels that runoff into those drains at the elevation below the Rayon's property. I mean, respectfully...
Below the Rayon's. I mean, we don't have contours on this map which show the Raynone's property, the contours on the Raynone's property. Now, somebody's got to book regulations.
At the property line.
At the property line.
Right, at the property line.
Maybe you can help me. In somewhere in the regs, there's a requirement to show the contours on adjacent properties within a certain buffer.
At the property line, which I think we comply with.
Well, I'm looking at this, at the property line to the Raynone's property line, and it's not clear to me whether their property then slopes up towards their house, or it from here slopes down towards their house.
The Rayon's property?
Yes.
Mr. Kozlowski?
It's substantially level, I believe, to the house. Beyond that, it probably drops off.
So
the difficulty there is, of course, you have to...
Thinking in the regulations, do you recall where I'm...
I don't, but I could look. I have my regulations as well. I mean, one of the problems I would think you would have would be, you can't enter somebody else's property for purposes of doing contours. And so I don't recall that specifically in the regulations, because I don't know how you'd affect that. Because how do I just go on the Rayon's property, or have Mr. Kozlowski on the property and start doing contours without their permission?
Well, their contour line showing a height is 96, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's supposed to be at the line, but what does it do once it gets into their property?
Well, now
does it continue to go down, or does it go up?
Well, it's still going down to their property, because we're showing a contour line here of 100.
I know it goes down that way, but then once we cross into their property, at that point, does it begin to go up again, or does it continue to go down?
It goes up slightly, then flattens. There's two spot, you can see elevation 96 along the wall, and then there's two spot elevations further into their property showing 96.4 at both.
What Commissioner Wag is trying to say is he wants to say another two lines. He wants to see another two or three lines.
I want to see some more lines. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, and I know that there is some...
You know, what he's trying to say basically is, was the property line the lowest point before, and now it's been raised up to a point where it's the water's continuing to rise down into Rayon's property. That's basically what we're getting at, rather than creating a V at the property line.
And I don't think the elevations and the contours you have would support that.
Yeah. Existing proposed resulting from the intended including Area 50. Right. So 24.5.2 requires contour lines to be shown, including an area within 50 feet of the premises shown on a map drawn to scale, blah, 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 blah.
I don't think that, I think we comply with that. I mean, I'm not saying, I want to...
I'm just talking it through right now, okay?
I don't think we can start going on their property, 50 feet into their
Well,
property doing contours.
Well, I mean, there are maps that are on public record. I mean, you try. There's nothing there's no means by which you could obtain contour lines from a public record on the Raynone's property.
The existing contours could be plotted from the aerial map. And on that point, as far as the quantities of fill, we're comparing an aerial survey with, as far as the pre-existing conditions, with field topo after the fact.
Right.
So it's a little bit of apples and oranges, and it's impossible to get an exact
And your
figure.
point is taken, and part of the reason why that's an issue is because they dumped all this fill on the property before going through this process in the first place. So it's a problem of their own creation. But what we're struggling with now is that this is not a situation where the neighbor is coming in and saying, "Oh yeah, sure, this is hunky-dory," and so this merits some additional inquiry.
But I
And
believe the low point was right along.
24.5.3 also requires existing and proposed drainage, buildings, and other structures on or within 100 feet of the proposed activity and the adjacent or nearby areas to the extent affected by such activity. Now, I understand your argument that the effect will be a benefit to the adjacent, but it's still an effect. And those buildings and other structures which are within 100 feet are not shown on your map.
We'd be happy to, if you want to leave the hearing open, we'd be happy to provide you, let's further define it, with the information that you're looking for from aerial map sources and whatnot. So you can do that. The other thing I would ask you to do, because I think it's important, as long as the hearing is going to remain open, and because the town's engineering department has spent a lot of time working on this with its personnel, is that you might ask them for some further input as well. I think Ms. Pooley's email is pretty strong, but I do think in fairness, forget about us, in fairness to the department, they should have an opportunity. So
let's put a peg in this for a moment, and we have, I think, a couple of other questions.
I just have a question about the fill for staff. Who will be responsible for inspecting the fill itself and making sure it wasn't contaminated or?
There was no laboratory testing. It was just, it's rock, and there's a lot of rock material and dirt. It's not construction material. We look to see if there's, wood.
Asphalt.
Right. And it's, there's no laboratory testing involved. It's just visual inspection.
And that's what you always do, like with anything. Okay.
Commissioner Barrett, and then Commissioner Corcoran, and then Commissioner Francis.
Yeah, Mr. Fallon, Commissioner Lessie was asking, trying to get a feel for how much this was raised up. Commissioner Coleman was asking how many trucks. I guess when we just see a number there, people are trying to get a visual more than the map over what we're talking about. And it's a lot of dirt. So everybody recognizes with you, the neighbors, the staff, that we can't change what what's transpired, and you talked about like what you've done since. I'm going to just ask you, Mr. Fallon, because this is a question that the neighbor asked too. You spoke of what we needed to do. Would you just pretend for a moment that you were just coming in with an application for 988 cubic yards of fill, adding, not taking away? And what is the rationale? What did you need to do? What did you hope to accomplish? And why should we approve the addition of 988? Not why should we approve what's already transferred?
Simply because it's there.
Simply because it's there, right?
Correct. Well, the way I think I would approach that in counseling a client in that situation would be, well, what do you want to accomplish? Well, we want to have a usable backyard for the children where the children can play. Okay, how are you going to do that, and what are going to be the impacts, if any, of doing that? Okay, let's hire a surveyor and an engineer, and let's talk about how you want to change the contours of your property, okay? Then let's talk to the engineer about how he or she is going to make sure that there's no adverse impact to any neighbor associated with the regrading that you want to do for your property, okay? And when we have that from the engineer, then we better go to the town engineering department, and we better see Mr. Lemon, and we better see Ms. Pooley, and we better give them the plan, and we better make sure that at the end of the day, before we file this application, we have a memorandum from the engineering department saying we've reviewed this and we think it is going to have a positive mitigative effect. And if you do all those things for me, Mr. Client, then I think I will file that application. So what I'm saying here
At some point, you probably counsel them to talk to their neighbors as well, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would, okay? I would do that. The answer is yes. But if I found the neighbors to be unreasonable in regard, I'd still follow the same process. Here what happened was they put the fill in. Not over 3 years at night. They started, they were told to stop, they did. What I have tried to do since then, in the last year and a half, before I brought this to you, is accomplish the same steps. If I didn't have the support of your town engineering department, you ladies and gentlemen know me well enough to know I wouldn't be standing, okay? I also know you well enough that you're very well entitled so that you can make the kind of careful judgment decision you always do. If there's additional information that you want, just articulate to us. I think I know, but so we're all very clear, and we can provide you that information. So you'll have that. And then I leave it to you, if you have any further questions, either now or after you get that information, if you want to have further questions of your town engineering staff. But that's
and we're entitled to it under 24. Thank you, Commissioner Alessi, for giving me a copy of the regulations. 24.5.9 does entitle us to any such additional information as we might deem necessary to
we would want you to have that. So you just tell us what you want, and we
Very
can
good.
leave the hearing open, and we'll get it to you.
Do you have any? Hold on. We gotta.
I'm good.
You're good, Commissioner Corcoran.
I wanted to ask Mr. Wayne. Is this on? Yeah. I'm curious about, Mr. Ramon said that the fill had asphalt and stumps in it. Did you observe that, and is that a problem?
Plenty of stone, for sure, but...
I think he said stumps.
Oh, stumps, I'm sorry. None that we observed.
Okay. Is there a standard for what needs to be in the fill?
Well, typically you don't want material that's going to decompose and create
Gas.
Yes, but there's no prohibition against asphalt, but we didn't observe it.
And Mr. Corcoran, just one other thing to kind of put the stumps in context. Again, a new house was being constructed there for the prior 2 years. There was a fair amount of tree clearing, stumping.
You talk to the attorney. You can talk to your attorney and then let him.
Between the new house and clearing after a storm, there was tree work done on the property. That's the only question. But the fill was clean. I mean, the whole intent here.
I think Commissioner Francis, are you?
You know, I just going to say, again, I would repeat, this was Mr. Stezkowski's father who was bringing this fill in to make a yard more playable and habitable for his grandchildren. So,
Understand.
That's probably.
I think Commissioner Francis was waiting next.
I
Then
pretty much
Commissioner
wanted to
Lassie.
know about the fill, which has been asked. What size lot is this? Quarter acre, half acre, third acre?
We have.
A little over half an acre.
And I would assume there's one more house beside it, between Wampus and Winnipout.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Between where?
And probably right here, beside the site, a little map here.
It
And a
looks like
couple more, besides Raynon's, there must be some
McCoppin.
more people down there.
and Raynon, McCoppin and Raynon.
I mean, you kind of wonder if anyone else is having problems.
No, I mean, it's a corner lot. Winnipout to the east, Romanov to the north. Our westerly neighbor is McCoppin, and the Raynons who are here are to our south. So there's only two abutting properties. And these drains, again, that have been installed do tie into the town system.
Okay.
Yes, I heard that.
Commissioner Alessi, then Commissioner Coleman.
You said you made the lot more playable for kids, or whatever, more conducive. What'd you do, just try and level the lot?
Yeah, my understanding, I didn't see it, but my understanding, and it gets to partially the drainage point, the lot was steeply sloped, correct?
Pretty much right from the back of the house, it was sloped down. So what they did was they filled it so there was a flat area and then it's sloped down like this. The purpose of what we're proposing here is to, rather than have a slope coming right down to the drains, is to create more of a basin type of an area around the drains, if you will. More of a S-curve to give the water a place to direct the water towards the drains.
Level off the back of the
Whereas
house.
before,
But I believe the lowest point was along the property line previous to any of the work.
Is there, I'm sorry, but it just occurred to me, I want to get on the record. Did your client have any objection to us in coming down and taking a look at the site?
oh heavens,
Okay. Commissioner Coleman.
Okay, it's really a procedural question for us. The weather report calls for rain on and off the next 4 days. Would we be permitted to, or perhaps have the town check out the Raynon property for water at the conclusion of this next soggy 4 days to see how bad the situation is?
Well, I don't know that we would be really wise to be now starting to inspect other people's homes, you know.
Well, we can observe what happens
on the surface, right.
and you do want to talk to the engineering department.
We can't expect what happens
No.
below the surface.
And you do want to check with your engineering department on that, because in fact, during some heavy rains over the last 6 or 8 months,
Yeah.
and again, they came out
Yeah.
to inspect
Yeah.
the integrity of the drainage
This is what I'm proposing.
as they had done it.
So that's why I asked if the applicant had any objection to us inspecting, coming down and taking a look at the property. So we can go down and take a look after a heavy rain or whatever to see
Anytime.
how this is functioning and
Anytime.
what the
And
site
and
is.
as I said, anytime, and the engineering department has done that
Yeah.
on more than 2 or 3 occasions over the last year, because they wanted to make sure the drains were
Right.
functioning as they thought they would.
And I presume that the Raynons, if they have a problem after this heavy rain, that they would put in some sort of message to the office indicating such a problem.
Yes. And then the last thing would be, if you want, to just, again, to tell Mr. Kozlowski and myself exactly the additional information so that we could submit that before the continued hearing.
Yep.
So you could have that.
I think, I'm confident that hearing what your questions and concerns are, that we as the staff can work with Mr. Kozlowski and our engineering department to get you the information.
Right.
Fine.
Okay. I don't know if there is any merit to the suggestion of neighbors trying to come together in some cooperative fashion, but certainly it would be helpful.
We extend that opportunity for dialogue to the Rayons. I could give you my card if it's helpful to have.
Excuse me,
that
Mr.
dialogue.
Fallon.
Yes.
Mr. Kozlowski, is that the Kozlowski from the Post Road down in Westport?
No.
No.
No, that's Kowalski.
That's
Kowalski.
Okay.
Has nothing to do
Good question. Yeah, I'm sorry, and I
But
missed
the
what
point,
you
I
just said.
Not to speak, not to the chair, but I did tell Mr. Sherman that we would be happy. They know where to find me. I'll give them my card. If there's anything we can do to make them feel comfortable and make sure they're protected, that's what we've been really working to do for the last year and a half.
Okay. Commissioner Corcoran.
Mr. Phelan, I heard you mention or talk about the new stone wall that's been put on the back, and I heard Mr. Ramon talk about a retaining wall. Is that the same wall?
I believe so. There's only one wall there, which you'll see when you go out there.
And was this wall part of the project of putting the fill in? I mean, is it part of the same?
The wall was built, was the wall built before or after the fill was begun? I don't think it's directly related to the application activities that bring you here today. It was undertaken during the construction of the house. Correct.
I thought I heard Mr. Ramon say that when the wall was put in, the level of the property was raised behind that wall.
Not to our knowledge. Go ahead.
It's about 2 feet high.
But it was not related to the building.
Okay.
Is the Kozlowski the same Kozlowski that's on the plan?
That's Mr. Kozlowski. Yes.
That's you?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's Mr. Kozlowski.
So you're the gentleman who brought
I've
over all
done
the...
the surveying, yes.
And you're the one who also brought in all the fill?
No.
That's...
We're getting close. First of all, Mr. Kowalski lives in Westport, has nothing to do with this.
Just share the last
Kowalski.
letters of our name, that's all.
Stezkowski.
Stezkowski is the owner.
He's the owner, and it was Mr. Stezkowski's father.
Stezkowski's father. And what is his name?
Stezkowski.
So the father's name is also Stezkowski.
Correct. And when Mr. Decker...
I apologize.
No, that's okay. When Mr. Decker came in...
It really doesn't have anything to do with
one of the first
the
things that
name.
they were
It's
told
I'm
to
just
do
trying to get the...
was to hire a reputable surveyor, engineer from the town of Fairfield, and they hired Mr. Kozlowski. Okay? And it was one of the names referenced from the town department. And Mr. Kozlowski...
I understand it now. Does everybody else? I'm sorry, I was behind the
Mr.
behind the curve on
Kozlowski
that
is
one.
just purely the professional who was retained to try
To
to
do the math.
assist, to get a handle on what has been done and what should be done.
I got it.
To make sure things would not have...
Apologize for the confusion.
I didn't put any dirt there.
Thank you, Ted.
I'm like, oh, I got the guy. He's right here.
So I think the way we'll leave it then is we'll make sure we get through Mr. Wendt what you're looking for. We'll get it for you at least a week before the hearing is continued. I do encourage you to reach out to the engineering department and hopefully we can...
Yeah, I think we have a couple of other questions. Mr. Corcoran.
So, where are we in the public hearing? I mean, it seems to me we have some disagreement as to basic facts, like whether the neighbor's characterization of the wall and the fill and the water in the basement.
Well, yep, I know where you're going. I can answer that. So, technically, for this, we were in rebuttal, but there will be new evidence introduced in the record, which will mean that when we resume, Mr. Fallon will introduce that into the record and explain that new evidence for us. and at which point we will then go back to public comment when he's finished, and then he will have another rebuttal period.
And what I'll try to do, Mr. Corcoran and members of the commission, is once we get the direction on your behalf from Mr. Wen, as I said before, I'll try to make sure that whatever we're going to submit to the record at the continued hearing, we have to him a week in advance so you can get it. And Mr. Mayon, if you want to just call me, I'll make sure that the same time I submit it to the staff, I'll get you a copy so you won't be looking at it for the first time the night of the hearing.
Precisely, and in which case then other folks can put in anything else that they would like to put into the record in order to be prepared for the hearing.
Correct.
Which Commissioner Corcoran will hopefully elucidate us on some of those facts that seem a little muddled right now.
And on top of that, you're all welcome
to visit the property.
Freedom of information.
Yeah.
But in groups to visit the property.
Yeah, right. Commissioner Barris.
Yeah, no, I don't think we do, that was my question, Mr. Chairman, maybe to, just advise Mr. But we, typically when we do site visits, we do them individually.
Correct.
Because if we had more than 3 of us there, it would be a meeting. And typically they're commercial properties, and we get permission, we walk on. If it's residential, it's usually like, a subdivision or something where it's just being developed.
Right.
Here we're talking about walking into people's backyards. I just want to make sure the applicant and the public understands that when we go there, we can't interact with them. In other words, we can't have, really conversations with them or anything like that. We're just there as independent observers. We can't get a hot
Don't
dog.
feed
No,
us.
we can't. No.
Might be the only time you ever
We
hear
can't.
me
Okay,
say that.
good. Okay.
But you can't feed
You're more than welcome.
Right. Just so whether it's the applicant that doesn't understand, we're just there to observe, not to interact. Because if you interact with us, that has to be in this type of proceeding. Without leaving my car? Okay, good. Even better. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? All right. So I will continue this matter, and for the moment, I'll continue the matter. All right, the next item on our agenda is 45 Sherman Street, special permit application of Jonathan and Carol Passmore for additions to expand residential use in the central design district.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, I'm John Fallon. I'm here representing John and Carol Passmore. Carol, come on up, Carol, so you. Mr. Passmore is on business out of the country, but this is Carol Passmore. They are the owners of the subject property at 45 Sherman Street. They're longtime residents of the town of Fairfield, and they decided to relocate from their current larger home and to reside in the second floor residential dwelling at this property. The first floor and the accessory garage structure, as I indicated in my statement of use, will continue to be used as it's been approved for many years by Mr. and Mrs. Passmore for offices in accordance with the approvals that I'll discuss. Mr. Passmore is an investment consultant, Mrs. Passmore is a family and adolescent counselor. Now, to give you a little history on this site, which is directly next door to my office, so I'm well aware of it. In September 2002, the commission approved an application of a previous owner for conversion of the second floor of the garage structure on the property to accommodate some additional office space. This space, as approved, was used in conjunction with the first floor area that's always been used and maintained as office. The second floor of the main structure has been continually used as a residence, as is allowed pursuant to section 12.3.16. About a decade ago, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved a 50% parking requirement reduction for that residential use. And in 2009, the prior owner sought a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals so he could convert the first floor of the garage accessory structure to office use. At the end of the day, all the uses that are established on the property, the residential and the office, require 5 parking spaces, and that's been approved since July of 2009. As I said, Mr. and Mrs. Passmore intend to utilize the existing approved office space for their respective business. They're not going to increase the square footage of the office area at all. What this application and the plans you have in front of you and what went to ZBA is all about is in order to increase the livability and function of the second floor residential area, they are requesting approval of the proposed additions and alterations that are shown on the architectural plans that you have. I want to point out a few things about that. What we're proposing here will not encroach into the rear yard, the parking area, if you will, beyond the existing exterior steps. That's important so that we won't in any way be changing the access to or configuration of the existing parking. We needed a variance, which we got in February 2014, because the addition to the residential area above is going to take the residential area to 1,865 square feet. The office area is 1,765, so that the residential portion is going to be 51.4% of the gross floor area. 50% is the technical requirement. The ZBA did grant unanimously a variance of that section for that purpose, and at the same time they also granted a variance to allow a small addition, which you'll see on the site plan, to the adjacent existing covered porch, just basically that was as much as anything aesthetic. So the ZBA has reviewed this and approved it. It's a small addition. It did have to come before you, though, because this is a design commercial district, and a small part of this does amount to an exterior alteration of the building, so that's why we're here. The Passmores are seeking this approval basically to do the additions that are proposed. Most of the addition work is going to be interior. I think you'll agree it's going to have a positive aesthetic impact on the property and the surrounding area. We talked to all of our surrounding neighbors. They all presented letters to the ZBA endorsing the project. We're not going to change the nature, scope, or utilization of the property as allowed in the regulations and as previously approved by this commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals. And it's a rather technical application only because of that small addition to the exterior of the building. But at the end of the day, the use of the property is going to be unchanged, but the aesthetics will be enhanced. Please answer any questions that you might have.
So I was looking at the handwritten drawings, and A3 shows 3 new dormers.
Ronnie, yeah. Could you introduce yourself, Ronnie, for the record?
Ronnie Angelo. I'm their builder.
Great. So the handwritten drawings, A3 shows 3 dormers facing outward. It looks like the roof lines on those are all the same, but then on A4, it sort of looks like the roof line on the middle dormer is turned.
Correct. That might have been a mistake by the architect. They agreed. The homeowners agreed that the gable look would be much better, much more appealing to the overall look of the house on the 3 dormers.
So to have the one in the middle turned?
The 3 dormers will look the same with a gable end.
Right.
Yes.
Like this?
Yes.
All the way across. So the A4 is an error?
Might have been an error by the architect, yes.
The bad news about that is it causes us to wonder what else is wrong in the drawings.
Again, it's an aesthetic mistake. Everything will be corrected in the final drawing. So that is strictly an aesthetic mistake.
And you can note that as a condition.
Yeah. That was the only question I had. Anyone else have any questions, comments? Commissioner Barrett?
Yes, will there be any, I mean, the Passmores are going to operate their business on the first floor. Will there be any signage? I mean, you're driving past this property, it looks just like a house on that street, and then next door, Mr. Fallon has his office, and you can see a small sign. So will there be, well, yeah, will there be any signage?
But he's got a little 6-inch net and a mini golf ball right there in front.
Only 6 holes. I think we are planning some signage, but we'll submit that as a separate package and make sure that it comes through you, but we haven't quite determined exactly what it's going to be, but I think some small signage would be in accordance with the regulations, something we'd be pursuing.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. You all set? All right. Is there any member of the public who wishes to be heard on this application? Hearing none?
A glass of drink of water, and I'll be right back for...
All right, hearing none, I will close the hearing. And we'll take a 1-minute recess. For 2 lots in an R3 zone. Mr. Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, I'm John Fallon. I represent the Bucks, and with me tonight is Mike Petula from the Huntington Company, who will just give you a very brief overview of what we're doing here. This is an interesting piece of property, to say the least. 95 Chester Place is in the R3 zone. Minimum lot area is 20,000 square feet. This property is 117,000 square feet, or 2.7 acres. If you go back through the historic records, it was previously owned by Mr. D'Addario. I think it was Mr. D'Addario. And this goes back probably 15 years. And they applied for a 5-lot subdivision on this property, and they got approved for 4 lots.
Wow.
And the record map was actually recorded and is of record, but they never did anything and built on it, so that subdivision elapsed. So we take you now to the Mr. and Mrs. Buck, who were longtime residents of the area. You can see they owned the property adjacent. They bought this property. Originally, we had plans, and in fact, we submitted to inland wetlands and got approval of an inland wetlands permit for 3 lots. So we went from D'Addario's 5, approved 4, to 3. And we had a meeting at one of the schools, I guess in Southport, maybe about 9 months ago, because we wanted to acquaint the neighbors with what we wanted to do. Now we were talking 3 lots, all very oversized and conforming, but the neighbors had concerns about the 3rd lot, the intensity of development, and so on and so forth. And
Were there a lot of neighbors came out?
More informationally than anything else, but there were, some concerns expressed about 3 lots. The Bucks, having their roots in the community, I won't speculate, but they basically said, well then, we'll do 2 lots. So now what's before you tonight is an application on this 2.7 acres in the R3 zone for 2 lots. One lot will be 38,789 square feet, and the other one will be 73,624 square feet. Serviced, as Mike will tell you, by public sewer, public water. We did receive, as I said, an inland wetlands permit in March of this year. The inland wetlands permit has approved this. You'll find in your file, and I won't read it to you, Ms. Pooley's memo from the engineering department dated April 22nd, 2014, where she addresses the findings with regard to the drainage being appropriate and the driveway sightlines being appropriate. So this is an interesting application. Sometimes the crowd or lack thereof speaks more volumes than I could, but it's evolved from a lot application that was approved for 4 lots maybe a decade and a half ago. Originally we were thinking of 3, now we're having 2. Mike, do you want to just say a few words? I think it's pretty straightforward, but just to kind of overview the site, the subdivision plan.
Members of the commission, my name is Michael Patillo. I'm a licensed land surveyor and professional engineer here in the state of Connecticut, and a member of the Huntington Company with an office here in Fairfield. As Attorney Fallon said, right now the property is vacant. It's approximately 2.7 acres in size. Rezone. What we intend to do is, because of the wetlands, we were required to offer, and we did offer a conservation easement to the town. There's a sanitary easement, sanitary sewer easement that also runs down the west side. We've got an existing sewer pipe that runs up to Chester Place to the existing manholes. Unfortunately, the existing sanitary sewer in Chester Place is only 6 inches in diameter. We were requested by the sewer department to change that pipe from a 6 to an 8-inch pipe, because to service more than one house, the pipe needed to be bigger. So we agreed to replace the sewer pipe in front of our property. Also, because of the existing right-of-way of Chester Place is only 30 feet wide, we're expanding the right-of-way in front of our property to your minimum requirement of a 50-foot right-of-way. We don't intend to improve any of the road. We won't make the pavement any wider. Again, these plans were reviewed by engineering, and they were in agreement.
You actually approved Chester Place as a scenic road not too long ago.
So I got 2 questions there. So the first is whether this impacts any, or that designation has any impact on the development. I don't think it does.
I'll let Mr. Wentz speak to it. I think that in accordance with the case law of the Weatherly decision going way back when, we have to make sure that we offer you sufficient right-of-way so that theoretically, if the town ever did want to widen Chester Place to 50 feet, they'd have our land to do it. So we've satisfied your requirements. Mr. Wentz or yourself, Mr. Chairman, could speak to it, but my understanding of the scenic road ordinance is, in the unlikely event that the town public works department ever wanted to, in fact, expand this right-of-way, they'd have to come back to you for that, but it has no impact on the subdivision.
And we see that on sheet 1 of 1. We see the 50-foot marker across to the right-of-way, across Chester Place into the adjacent.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Also about the drainage, I did computations using the HydroPad drainage program. I looked at storms from a 2-year storm up and including the 100-year storm. There'll be no increase in stormwater runoff. Also looked at the sightlines, proposed driveways. The posted speed limit is 25 miles an hour in the neighborhood. And I pointed out in my report that we've got sightline up to a 35 mile an hour speed limit. And again, Laura Pooley's comments agreed with both my drainage and the sightline capabilities of the 2 driveways.
Thank you, Mike. So that's really it. In a nutshell, we'd be pleased to answer any questions you might have. But It's hopefully you'll agree, a rather benign subdivision application for this 2.7 acres.
You've got the buildable square,
Got the buildable square,
you got the setbacks,
got the setback,
you got the frontage.
got the frontage.
You got the square and the frontage too, our new, this actually
Yes.
conforms to our new requirement.
Yeah.
Sure does.
Two lots, it would have to be 100 feet on each, and you've got more than 100 feet.
I do.
At the road, at the road.
Right.
Yep.
I would have had it for 3 lots.
But
Like
would have
I
been
said.
harder to do 3 lots.
We
They're,
could've done
they're long gone. Stop talking about it.
No, but
I'm
yes,
just
the answer
teasing.
is, obviously, it's designed to meet your new specifications.
Right.
I'm
Anyone
going to get a jolly rancher now.
Anyone else? Questions? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Done?
Thank you, ladies
Very
and
good.
gentlemen.
Is there any member of the public that wishes to be heard on this application? Okay, going once, going twice. Mr. Fallon? I will close the public hearing, and that will adjourn our meeting.